reality. Yeah. And I'm glad when we set up this meeting, it was kind of a different world. And now we're on a different planet. It was
It's
senior.
been in the most insane turn of events, and I'm happy that we're all still here talking to each other at this point. And it's
Exactly. Yeah. Now I can tell from other interviews you've done that you are a very upbeat person.
I am a relentless optimist. Yes.
Right. So I'm hoping to get a sense of uplifting optimism.
Oh, I can do.
But we have to be honest about it.
If you want optimism, you come to the right place. Although it's hard for people like me right now, because we do see what's possible, and I'm really gratified by what's been going on in terms of watching the whole world kind of coming together to try to grapple with a crisis like this, and being really inspired by it. There are many days, I mean, I'm an activist, I measure the quality of my life by the quality of my civic environment. And so as I look around and see people, hundreds of people serving food to each other, coming up with, home delivered meals. They had a problem on a phone call today. I was listening in. It was a quote unquote problem, because hundreds of people want to go and deliver meals to seniors in New York City. And the city's not really set up for that. Like, they don't have a system for it. And so they're having to tell people, just like, hold on a minute, we're trying to figure out how to identify who needs it and how to handle the public health issues associated with such a thing. And, everybody's trying to kind of sort out what to do. But the thing that's really been gratifying for me is to see the level of just the pure emotional desire that people have to help each other and to come together around this. And that's been what I've been observing. And it of course makes me feel really uplifted and really optimistic about the world in the long run. But of course, then you get the crisis and the consequences, and real people are really dying. And it's really jarring and shocking to hear.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my wife last night. She's in New York and I'm in Louisiana, and she just is so anxious and she could barely sleep,
Yeah, especially being away from you. And,
well, I think that's the best part for her. She makes her much less anxious not to have me knocking around in the kitchen.
Right.
No, but that's right. That's right. In case anything were to happen to one of us, being apart makes it very stressful.
Yeah. And so I was going to start with the basics of Senior Planet. What is Senior Planet? It's something that I need desperately. And, to get started, as if this all weren't happening, but then go to how Senior Planet is adapting to the current situation. So maybe we can backtrack a little bit and start with what how you started Senior Planet, where it how it evolved.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Grown.
It's interesting. I was just before talking to you, I was on a call with a guy from Japan who's working on a project trying to get Senior Planet started in Japan. I don't know if it would ever take root, but we're discussing it. And he had a really neat reaction to something I said. And he said something like, oh, the thing that makes Senior Planet special is that you're humanists with a social mission that work with technology. It's this sense of the humanism of it that drives our thinking. And so I'll kind of use that as a framing idea, because I thought it was a pretty cool way of looking at our work. We started out 15 years ago. I was an activist before I worked on Senior Planet. I was a catch-all nonprofit do-gooder. I used to do housing work and homelessness work. I did economic development projects. I did revitalization work in Lower Manhattan, always trying to help think about how to bring people together to solve problems. And by lucky happenstance, I became friendly with an older woman who asked me if I might help her with a computer one day. And her name was Pearl, and I started tutoring her every week for a year. And she would come to my office on Monday mornings, and we would hang out together and do computer classes. And I got very excited about what was happening in her life, first around the technology, and then secondly around just aging. She was just a really cool older woman. And I became really animated by what could happen if we gave people more empowerment through the digital skills that are available, and more engagement with the world, the sort of modern, connected world that we've built. So, and I don't mean that in a one directional way. You know, Senior Planet was never about finding a bunch of vulnerable old people and filling their brains up with computer skills. You know, it was always about thinking about the cost to everyone. And I think maybe even the higher level of consequence for the broader society when we create a society that's so age segregated and that has such a poor uptake on the skills and the contributions of older people. And so when the technology sort of set of opportunities and challenges hit the system, it opened up that fissure. You know, it created a kind of a light into what was going on for people. So older people who were, you know, already doing, this is already happening. You know, ageism was a reality, and underinvesting in the future of older people and under engaging with people's productivity was always a problem. But the technology issues brought it to the fore, and people started saying, oh my gosh, we really need to do something about this right now, because people are not able to communicate and they're not able to participate in some of the most basic things. So we started, it was originally called OATS. OATS is still the nonprofit and the parent organization.
And that's Older Adults Technology Services?
That's correct. And that's you know, I founded the group in 2004 with a bunch of older people helping me out. And so OATS was the parent organization. The first thing we did was go out and sit down with people over 60 and say, what do you want to learn and how do you want to learn it? And built some curriculum. It turned out that what seemed like a fairly straightforward, seat of the pants kind of common sense model was really like unusually collaborative and unusually practical. And so because we weren't really a bunch of computer nerds trying to tell people how to, you know, resize their desktop icons or play with their file systems or whatever, none of us cared about computers. You know, we were all activists. And so that kind of orientation seemed to gel really well with what older people wanted to do online. And after about a year of experimenting, we had developed this extremely powerful methodology and course to get absolute beginners online and using technology. And there's a bunch of social theory that I was playing around with at the time I still really am interested in that helped inform it. But a lot of it was really just people saying things like, you know, after an hour and 15 minutes, a lot of the guys in the class have to go to the bathroom. So that's probably a good time to knock off, you know.
Right.
And people were coming back and saying, geez, you know, what we learned last Wednesday was a week ago. I don't remember half of it. Not because they're old and have dementia, because who the hell can remember this stuff? Nobody can remember stuff, you know, like that a week later when it's technical. It's like when you go to a language class in the university, they meet 2 or 3 days a week because you want to maintain that mental momentum, right? So we started just accommodating all of those obvious practical things, but it turned out to be a very cumulatively, we built a very, very powerful mousetrap to engage older people and help them learn to use technology, but also fit it into their lives, become more comfortable, become more confident, be respected in the process, and activate themselves to use it for some purpose. You know, the first question we always ask is, well, what do you want to do with this? So that became a big difference for us. And then
how did you find these people, by the way? Where did they come from? Where did this group come from, population?
My business has no shortage of customers. They find us. You know, when I started out, only 26% of people over the age of 65 had ever been on the internet in 2004. And at the time, I remember being shocked by this. Like, oh my gosh, you know, how can it be, right? And today, 15 years later, the numbers are still, you know, it's kind of reversed. About 75% of seniors have actually been on the internet, but still 25% have not, which is kind of staggering. And in New York City, just as an example, 42% of seniors are not on the internet at home. They do not have internet connectivity in their homes. And for isolated seniors, sorry, I'm in a marina, there's boats going around in the background there. For isolated seniors who live alone, 60% of them lack internet at home. Wow, I mean, can you imagine? Just think about the mismatch there in terms of what's needed and what's available and how shocking that is. And so we didn't, you know, back in the day, it wasn't super hard to find people that really wanted to learn this stuff. There's so much pent up demand for participation and aging and for learning. So the first thing I did, I went to the very first group I put together was in a housing development at 700 Gates Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York City. African-American community. It was a public housing development subsidized, I think, by Section 8. And it's called the Betty Shabazz Complex, Dr. Betty Shabazz Complex.
Yeah.
And the Tenants Association knew me from back in the day when I was a housing activist. And I was coming to their meetings, and I remember I had to leave one of their meetings a little bit early because I had to go home and put my kids to bed. And they remembered that I did that. And when I called them a couple of years later and said, look, I'm looking for a site that I could do this, I could pilot this program I'm developing, and I was wondering if you guys would be guinea pigs. They said, yeah, you're the guy who had to leave early to go put his kids to bed. I said, yeah. They said, we like you because you're a family man. Come on in and we'll work with you. You know, trust is such a big factor. So that was my first group. And then after that, it was word of mouth. In certain locations, if we come somewhere we've never been before, nobody's ever heard of us, like some of our rural programming or some of our programming in new communities where we're just, you know, people are new. We'll do some outreach. We'll do some local press. We'll do some targeted meetings. It's not so hard to find people. But what turns out to be very important is that you need to build an intentional community, which means reaching out in a diverse way. Because people tend to have these little pockets of social engagement. So if you start out in one neighborhood or with one institutional connection, before you know it, everybody looks like the people that go to that institution. And if they're all African-American and they're, you know, Baptists and they live in a certain community in Washington, D.C., everybody in your program looks like that. And if you're in a program in North Dakota or South Dakota with a very different, you know, racial and economic profile that you're dealing with, then everybody's going to look like that. So if you want to make sure that you get a healthy community around the technology, which tends to be part of the value of what we're doing, then you have to go out and do those sort of, you know, more thoughtful outreach efforts to bring people in and make sure that the balance is more interesting. And I'll tell you, it really comes back to us in terms of success, because as it turns out, you know, Americans sort of like to get to know other people, you know, when they put them in the room. We're a little nervous about it sometimes the first 5 minutes, but when you bring people together that are not similar and you put them in a room of 12 or 14 and they're learning technology together, it's so much more enriching because they have all this cultural and interpersonal dialogue and dynamic that goes on. And that kind of connection has really paid off in dividends.
So if I go into someday when we're allowed to go be together, if I go into a Senior Planet office or center, what would I do, and how would I, you know, function? How would I manage that?
So one of the things to think about is I'll give you a short answer and then a slightly longer answer. The short answer is you would show up at a Senior Planet Center and they would say, Wendy, how are you? How old are you? And you'd say, I'm whatever it is, over 60, anything over 60. And they would ask to see some maybe proof of that. And then as soon as you've been ascertained as a person over 60, there are no other regulations aside from the fact that you be, you know, able to walk in the door. And able to function in a group environment, you know, not like swinging a bat around and being crazy. And then you would be, on the very short term, allowed to use the center. All of our programs are free to the end user. So if you went to the Senior Planet Center in Manhattan, there's about 20 computers around the center that people can use for free. There's Wi-Fi that you can plug into. You can come charge your phone. You can come play with our robots or our VR machines or, you know, technologies, or experiment with different things. And then our programming breaks into 3 different kinds of programs. There's the very, very sort of personalized version of it, which are typically one-on-one coaching sessions. And we typically use volunteers who are very carefully trained and supervised to work with you on anything that you need to know. People show up all the time with a device that's still wrapped in the shrink wrapping. And they'll come in and say, I got this for my birthday. I don't even know what it is. Could you please unwrap this for me? And let's look at the manual. Do I even want it? You know, do I even want this in my house? And so they'll come in with these things. And, you know, that's part of the fun, right? And so we'll sit you down with a volunteer, they'll read through the manual, and, you know, typically they have some clue as to what we're dealing with. But it can be things, a very common question is that people have photographs that are stuck on their smartphones and they can't figure out how to download them and get them off. And they want to clear the phone, they want to get a new phone, but they don't want to lose all the old pictures. And so, you know, that's a really common problem that people face. And that's a standard challenge that comes up because you've got a sort of a transitional moment with the technology, you have a platform definition issue that comes up for people, and then you have a personal narrative thing around people's memories, which is, to me, you know, I don't think I could overestimate the value of people's memories. I couldn't say anything that to me would seem like they were too important, because they're that important. You know, what we carry collectively as people in our photographs and our stories is what we are, you know, as a species in a lot of ways. And so people are coming to us with this like gift, you know, it's like the crown jewels, you know, it's like, please help me not lose these. And so our volunteers sit down and they help people get the stuff off their phones and put them on a jump drive and back them up on the web, and all the stuff that people, you know, who are sort of digitally more comfortable, you know, that just have done it a few more times, are good at. But, you know, people who don't know how to do it, if there's a lot of risk there. So that's level one. And then level two is that we have a lot of lectures and informational workshops. So for people who are looking about, right now, everybody's talking about Zoom, right? What is Zoom? I heard about Zoom. What is this Zoom thing? So we have lectures on it to demystify and explain, put it in human terms. You know, we try to get away from the engineer speak and much more into sort of thinking about the customer. So you would probably pop into a lecture. And again, those lectures are not about, they're not usually just about the technology. They're often about what to do with it. So we're doing a lecture recently. This week we're doing live lectures on how to, let's see, there was one on, we're doing a lot of stuff on online banking right now. Managing your money online, you know, staying safe online. What are the interfaces?
Great.
Dozens and dozens of videos about this that we've developed together with Capital One a few years ago. It turns out it's in English and Spanish. It's a really good resource. But, you know, everybody, we were already getting a lot of volume on those videos, but now, of course, everybody's desperate for that information. So we're doing lectures and workshops on that. And then that's just one example. We just launched one today, or just finished one today, on telemedicine. How do you prepare for this? Telemedicine.
Oh, telemedicine, yes.
Yeah, so, you know, when everybody says, oh, we'll do telemedicine. Well, you know, yes, but let's kind of get prepared for that, because it's not obvious, like, you know what a normal doctor visit is, but what does it mean when the doctor is coming through your phone or your computer, you know? How do you prepare for that? Like, what do you need to, you know, the lighting and what kind of, you know, device should you be using, and how do you make sure that your neighbor's not watching you talk about your, you know, your private health information? And so all of that information is important to have people be able to ask questions and get informed. It's a brave new world of this stuff, but it's also a bit riskier for people, and it can be very frustrating. So we're doing these one session workshops. And then if you happen to be around at the beginning of the calendar quarter, every single calendar quarter, all of our courses reset. So January, April, July, October. And we'll have a whole bunch of multi-week courses that start at the beginning of each quarter. And they're all over the country. So anywhere you go, everything is centralized in terms of the programming and the calendaring. It's all done out of the New York office together with our local teams. But if you went to San Antonio, the first week of April, they're going to start a whole bunch of 5- and 10-week courses on skills building. If you go to
person courses, or these are online courses?
Yeah, so you were asking if you came to the center, right? So in the centers, we teach all these in-person courses, but we also teach them through partnerships. Last year, we were at just under 200 locations around the country. And those are not Senior Planet centers. They're mostly senior centers. They're housing developments, libraries, multi-service agencies, nursing homes, you know, anywhere where somebody's got a computer room or a space for Wi-Fi enabled tablets, we'll go and teach there. And those 10-week courses typically are meant for, they're kind of like language learning courses, but learning the language of technology as an older person. So it's skills building. They're on 3 different platforms. So you can learn on the PC, the iPad, or the Chromebook. And you can learn the basics in any of 5 languages. So you can learn English, Spanish, of course, Russian, Chinese, and we happen to have Bengali, just in case you speak Bengali. Yep. And, you know, sometimes we get these opportunities, we always go for them. So you could take a sort of beginner course on any of those topics. If you wanted to learn the absolute basics, because you've been standing on the platform for years watching the technology train drive by you, and you've decided to step onto the train, this is an opportunity for an absolute beginner to do it in a really low stress, cost-free, highly organized and very professionalized environment for them. And then, you know, fairly soon after you complete your first course, you're going to be sort of finding yourself gently nudged to become part of the Senior Planet community. And I can talk more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. So as a grandparent, I related very strongly to your example of getting the photographs off the phone, and so I know that it's grown into almost a senior, a senior support group, a senior community. And now suddenly we're faced with not being able to be there in person, and social connection is so important to seniors. Social isolation is a really big problem. And I know your program was formed to counteract that.
Yes.
So how can we keep connected now that we can't be there in person? Like, I'm cut off from my grandchildren. But I'm talking more about the Senior Planet program, and how
so
that can keep going.
There's a couple things that are really critical. First of all, younger people, your grandkids have typically, many cases, already use a lot of these technologies. I guess there's, grandchildren are not a simple demographic, of course. There's a real difference between your 2-year-old toddlers and your 18-year-old grandkids, But the older ones certainly have been on technology, communicating and using all these devices and tools typically for quite a while. And so on the one hand, getting comfortable with the urgency of learning the communications tools that are critical right now is really important. There's a kind of a tool, there's an acquisition process for people, because it used to be that you would just show up and your grandkids were there and you do things, and you may have thought, like, I never need to learn how to do a video call because my grandkid lives a mile away, right? But today you can't do that now, right? So what happens if you suddenly have to learn the technology? So Senior Planet gives you a place where right now you can go online. We're actually teaching video classes on how to do all this stuff. Now, of course, you have to be able to functionally get in front of a screen in your home, which is going to take some effort. And we're actually doing phone calls for people to coach them through setting up the internet at home. So for people that are trying to learn how to do that, if you've got the patience, we've got the patience. All of our trainers are calling hundreds of people a week right now, and they are reaching out to them and saying, like, how can we help you get set up at home with the right system so that you can communicate with your family, right? So number one is, because many people, again, as I was saying before, 4 out of 10, are not online in New York City. And in order to communicate with your grandkids, you may need that. You could use a smartphone, but many people don't have smartphones either, by the way. There's a fairly large number that are just audio phone based. So if you want to set that up, we'll help you do that. And you can use a volunteer, or you can watch one of our instructional programs, or else we're also starting to distribute materials that are kind of tip sheets and things. So different people learn in different ways. Secondly, though, just the technology doesn't get you far enough. In fact, it's only about, I would say it's maybe 25% of the effort. The other part of it is learning how to be an effective communicator and an effective family member through the medium of the technology. Because the technology really shapes how people perceive us and how we communicate. It alters the dynamic a little bit. And if you're not familiar with it, it becomes difficult you have to learn the system a little bit. Kind of like learning the ropes, they say, or learning the cultural touch points. So for example, you may have, there's this kind of stereotype of the older relative or the older person sending emails around with all caps, type with all caps, and then forward, somebody else's joke that somebody else has forwarded, and then they send it to their grandkids, and it's 5 different levels of forwarding of some sort of not very funny joke, but then an all caps thing across, you really should read this, it's really funny. And it seems sort of a little bit awkward or ridiculous. It'd be like wearing your underpants on the outside of your clothes. People would notice it, and they might ridicule you a little bit because it's sort of silly. Nobody's going to take it all that seriously, and obviously there are family members, they love us, they're going to be somewhat accommodating, but why have to have that uphill conversation in the first place? It's better when you become when you develop some of the social skills around how to communicate. So one of the things I think is important with grandkids today is, in terms of the coronavirus, is finding ways to create what I would think of as successful or sort of sticky interactions. When I say sticky, I mean the person's going to come back for another one when you finish the first one. So a few things to keep in mind. First of all, keep everything a lot shorter than you normally would. You should probably be the first person as the grandperson to sign off on the call before the younger person says, like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to whatever I was doing. If they say that, you've probably hung on for too long. So get on the phone. These video calls and digital interactions tend to be in bite-sized chunks. So spread them out a little bit. You know, do a 5-minute or 10-minute thing every day or two, but try not to do a 45-minute long one unless you know that person really wants it, which they typically don't. And so, you know, digest everything into bite sizes, and also find, you know, lead with engaging stuff. You know, the digital format tends to create distance. So for younger people, they don't want you to call up and say, like, if you've been reading about coronavirus on the internet, you know, that's such a conversation stopper right now. You know, you could call up and say, you know, hey, you know, you can relate to younger people because they're all going stir crazy. So, you know, what are you watching online? Are you know, did you find any good Netflix shows for, you know, that you want to recommend? Have you seen anything funny? You know, and even sometimes to ask people to tell you about a new format like Instagram. You know, there are neat apps out there that a lot of people use a lot. And particularly Instagram is a fun one because it's so visual and it's entertaining and it's bite-sized. So ask a younger person if they're on Instagram, and they don't always want to share their profile with you, but ask if they'll tell you if there are any good people to follow or how to do that kind of thing, or share a funny movie or something with them. Just kind of keep it engaging, but try to avoid talking about a lot of health problems and dynamics that people tend to get a little bit belabored with. And because time is so short and the video creates that distance, maintaining a certain level of emotional levity and engagement is really helpful for people.
Right, right. And also, I noticed that you help people start their small businesses and keep them going.
Yes, we do.
You know, so how can that be affected by what's currently going on? Are you still able to do that?
We are going to be continuing that course. I'm not sure it's going to come up in the first round or the second, but it's on the list. I don't see any reason why any of the content that we deliver can't go through the video format that we're developing right now. In fact, and Alex can probably confirm whether or not this is in the next round. I think it's going to be one round after this. But the entrepreneurship courses to us are very important, partly because they are economic lifelines for people, and they're also creative lifelines for people. Many seniors that are coming to us with entrepreneurial ideas are not necessarily trying to buy a mega yacht or become a billionaire. They're really looking to do something that is a passion that they've had for years, but they're looking for an opportunity to actually put it together as a marketable project. And so our curriculum helps them do that. Many of those programs are home-based businesses anyways. You know, there's a gentleman that I know that does greeting cards. He used to work for Hallmark. He actually invented the African-American market of greeting cards. You know, when you go to to Hallmark stores, sometimes you'll see cards that are sort of more demographically
Right.
targeted. And he's African-American, and he helped kind of create this whole business. And he's himself a really talented artist. So he started developing his own cards and selling them online. There's a woman that I know that does a lot of sewing and bags and things like that. She works out of her home. A lot of these businesses are primarily home-based businesses. And in fact, they lend themselves very well to a situation like we're dealing with. If you're trying to bring in an extra few $100s a month, seniors are full of ideas. I'm not going to tell people what to do, but when they come to us with an idea, you know, we can certainly help them think about how do you make a website for that, or how do you find a name that's not already taken by somebody else, or how do you do fulfillment with things like that. So we're definitely still interested in supporting the entrepreneurship, and I think it's going to go on for a while.
And you were talking about becoming a member of Senior Planet.
Yes.
So is there any cost for that, or what does that entail? And how can you dip into Senior Planet and then get deeper into it?
Yeah, so there's two ways to come at Senior Planet. One is just simply as a consumer of all the wonderful things we do, and you don't have to be a member to do that, and you don't have to be a member to come to the centers or take our classes or do any of that stuff. But a lot of people have told us over the years that they want to help us have a bigger impact. You know, we're a nonprofit, we're a social change nonprofit. We're not just a training organization. We're really about helping to change what's going on out there in aging. And we can't do that by just relying on government funding or foundation funding. Those guys are going to fund us for, you know, a class or a course or something specific. But when it comes to the impact that we're talking about and measuring that impact, we need people with us. And so it started out actually as members became activists. So the participants started becoming activists. They wanted to go to Albany with us. They wanted to go to City Hall with us and push for better programming for aging and for technology and for funding for projects like what we were doing. And so hundreds of people started coming to these hearings, and they would, we would say there's a hearing coming up, and people would come down with signs and things. And so membership grew out of that. It grew out of the activism. And so what we've done is created a model, it's like a tier of engagement, a kind of a threshold where you can sign up to become a member. I think we're suggesting $15 a year right now. I can't even remember what they put on the list, but it's really whatever people, if you give $1, you're a member. It's really, it's not about the money. It's about the ownership. It's about the sense of a person feeling like they are kind of a booster of the Senior Planet mission. And it's all about the mission and the impact. You don't become a member because you get discounts or you got like any kind of major special services. We're probably gonna have a few member-only events like briefings and things like that, but really about the social purpose. So for people who want that, who want to see us as their social mission, the same way that maybe you're a member of the World Wildlife Fund or anything out there that you have a passion for, we want people to be able to support us to achieve that mission. And it's really voluntary. No amount is too little, and of course no amount is too big. So if you happen to be a billionaire, we're happy to get that. But we're really getting a lot of people who are doing $15 a year and things like that, and it enables us to really support that activism element for what we're doing.
Right. I'm very fortunate that I am during this crisis. I'm married, and my husband and I like each other. We've been together for 51 years.
Congratulations.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's a recent widow, and she is alone. She also has no children. And so she's in New York City in her apartment, really feeling isolated. How would Senior Planet, if I recommended Senior Planet to her, how could she use that and avail herself of the advantages of that right now?
Well, to start with, is she online?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Great. So, being online, if she went right to seniorplanet.org today, there's a whole calendar of events that she can schedule up for. And those events are interactive. So she'll be on a Zoom call, and she'll be looking at the screen just like we are. And it's very interactive on Zoom because you can send questions and comments in. So you immediately become part of a community of people that are learning together and helping each other. That's the first step. And then if she's looking for more personalized interaction with people, part of that involves, we're going to be talking a lot about with those sessions about how to do more social engagement. Some people are doing volunteer projects either as recipients of the volunteerism or as providers of the volunteerism, or both. Just companionship. So we're getting calls from, we're working with groups like Verizon and different companies that are offering some volunteers to us right now. And our own staff are doing it as well, where people are doing the calls through and the companionship and the engagement that way. So we're connecting her.
I'm sorry, excuse me. You said Verizon's offering small, I didn't
volunteers for
volunteers.
Yeah, okay. Verizon has thousands and thousands of Verizon staff who want to volunteer. And we were working with them actually to come to our centers and do volunteerism. So we're trying to shift over that model now so people can do it online. We're still in the first couple of weeks of it, so we're figuring out who's coming and who's going. But if she's on the Senior Planet calendar and watching what's going on, she'll see all these trainings. If she's looking for more, for example, if she's single and she's looking for social relationships that might turn into romantic ones, there are websites for that, and we support people in using them and training them. There's one that's a companionship site that I haven't checked on lately, but it's called Stitch, that does bring people together. And then there are the more common ones, that people use that are that have much broader networks out there. And they're very catch as catch can, depending on a person's preferences. So some of them are a little bit more elaborate and you put in profiles, and some of them are you put up a pretty picture yourself and talk to people. But for companionship and conversation and understanding how to stay, as long as you understand the limitations and how to stay safe and things like that, and what kind of information to disclose and what kind not to disclose, you can really make friends with people, and people do it. There's a lot of online connection going on through those formats right now. We can help her find the right one for herself.
Okay, great, thank you. Do you have any other words of wisdom and solace for those of us who are stuck home, which is mostly everybody, I guess? Everybody,
right? I guess what I've been trying to do with it is, what I'm observing, and I'm not putting myself up as any paragon here, but what I'm seeing from people who seem to be succeeding with us or handling it pretty well is that they have people are creating a kind of a daily routine, and it's a new routine. Everything has changed, at least for the time being. And so it's an opportunity to kind of recreate our commitment to ourselves, you know, reshape that and reallocate our personal time resources. So, you know, what I'm seeing is people, again, the people are creating these sort of agendas. It's the morning routine of exercise before 9 a.m. and then get out of bed and make your bed. That's a really important piece of advice, but it matters, right? And then people are getting up and, you know, getting their exercise, working on home exercises, which in some cases, by the way, are better than what we might do in the gym. It turns out, because the gym equipment sometimes is a little bit, you know, does certain things well and certain things not so well. But when you're at home, you work your core really well. There are all sorts of home-based exercises that are wonderful. There's a fantastic older woman who is a rising Instagram star named Joan McDonald. You can look her up. She does, I think her site is called Train with Joan. And she's a rock star. She has like 225,000 followers or something like that on Instagram. And she's in her 70s and she's recreated her workout routine. And, you know, and so one of the things a lot of people are doing is they're getting up in the morning and they're watching Train with Joan on Instagram and getting a workout routine together. And then they're looking at, you know, some of they're getting more creative. A lot of us are getting more creative with things like cooking and how we're cooking at home so that we're healthier. You know, we're not going to have as as many steps each day necessarily. So we need to be a lot more careful and thoughtful about what we eat and what we read and listen to. But those kinds of, that intentionality of taking this moment as a break from the way we've always done things and give you a kind of a jarring, and in some cases a very unwelcome, but a very real forced reconfiguration of your time setting is really important. And a lot of people seem to be finding a silver lining in some of this through that. And I think I would encourage people to try to look for that. And of course, also to use all of these social resources and technology resources to stay safe. You know, even if you are observing best practices, mental health is a big part of this success for people. If you're not able to maintain your social contact and your physical activity within the home, you're going to start to struggle. Many of us are going to start to struggle with depression. And that's often underappreciated and untreated and unrecognized. So I think for people to take extra care of themselves psychologically by doing things that they know feed their psychological health, whether it's a daily conversation with a friend, or I just went out yesterday and I was doing all these errands that I had to do that were necessary, but I did stop off and I bought 2 flower pots that I brought home and put up on my porch here on the boat so that I could see them, because I knew that was really important for my state of mind. You know, those little things that take care of yourself a little bit are really important right now.
Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And this part isn't in the interview, but my husband used to be assistant director of the Hudson Guild Neighborhood House.
Oh, of course. I know them well.
Fulton Senior Citizen Center.
Wow. And, so he must know us.
Yeah, he is an MSW. Well, this is he's 76.
Oh,
and
okay.
He hasn't been there in a long time.
Okay, gotcha.
And so he got an MSW from Hunter, and he was a social work administrator and worked in housing and worked for economic development for the city. And I've always been a journalist, but so our kids could figure out what it was we each did. It was easier with me. But so anyway, we really relate to a lot of what you're speaking of. And so very, very grateful. Oh, by the way, I used Instacart for the first time today. So ordering groceries at home is kind of a challenge. I ended up with 3 gallons of milk, which I really don't need. I don't know how that happened.
There's a slippage factor there.
But there they are in our refrigerator. So I'm going to try to find someone to give milk to. Anyway, so thank you again for all your help. And we're going to have this article and hopefully clips from our interview. And I hope that that all goes well. And I can hardly wait, and I'm sure you feel the same way, until the in-person version of the original version of Senior Planet can be back again, and you can be with everyone in person.
Well, feel the same way, and of course we're enduring this, but looking forward to the opportunity to bring it all back together. I honestly think that when we're all done, that some of the changes that are going to come from this may be healthy in the long run, because people will become more connected with some of this technology stuff that we have
Yes.
for many reasons. Many years I felt that the disconnect on the technology and the disconnect on the social relationships that are really attenuated right in American culture right now. That we've been kind of papering that over, you know, acting as if it was sort of not a problem. And it's not just a problem in a time of crisis like this, but it's a kind of low grade problem for everybody. And hopefully we're going to break some of those log jams. And so a year from now, you know, our centers will be back open and people will be connecting with each other again, but the digital stuff will still be robust, you know, so we'll have more than we had before, and hopefully a little bit more successful way of interacting. And that's what I'm looking forward to anyways.
Okay. Yes. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And tell your
Thank you.
husband, I said that I'm probably following in a lot of his footsteps and without knowing it. So I appreciate that he was
Yeah.
doing all
Great.
that one generation before me.
Yeah. It was great meeting you and wonderful speaking with you.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.